You can give an avoidant your time, your patience, your softness, your loyalty, your late-night understanding, your calm voice, your space, and your second chances, and still feel like none of it truly reaches them. That's the part that confuses and hurts, because it brings up the hardest question of all. How can someone be surrounded by this much love and still stay distant? How can they see your effort and not naturally come closer? The truth you need to understand early is that avoidant people are not mainly driven by effort, sacrifice, or how much someone gives. What actually guides them is whether they feel emotionally safe within the connection. That sense of safety sits at the very center of how they respond, even when everything on the outside looks like closeness or love. What often breaks people is the slow realization that what feels like love from you can feel like pressure to an avoidant. What feels like devotion and consistency can register internally as weight or expectation. What feels like proof that you care can land as emotional demand. When this isn't understood, a painful cycle begins where you try harder, give more, explain better, stay calmer, and even reduce your own needs just to keep things from falling apart. You start shaping yourself into someone easier to receive, hoping that will finally bring them closer. But instead of building connection, it often creates more distance, because the more intensity and availability you add, the more overwhelmed their system can become, even when your intentions are deeply loving. To understand this pattern, you have to see what their system is actually protecting. For many avoidant individuals, closeness has often been connected with discomfort, criticism, emotional chaos, or a loss of personal space. Over time, they learn that getting too close could mean losing freedom, peace, or even their sense of self. So they adapted by choosing independence over dependence, distance over vulnerability, and control over emotional surrender. That adaptation once helped them cope and stay safe. But it doesn't disappear in adulthood, even in relationships where there is real care. So when someone shows strong emotional openness, it may not only register as love to them, but also as something that could become overwhelming or consuming. Real attachment in this dynamic does not usually grow in moments of intensity, emotional chasing, or repeated proving. It grows in quieter spaces where nothing is being demanded and where the connection is allowed to breathe. When an avoidant person feels that they are not being cornered emotionally, watched constantly, or pushed to respond in a certain way, their nervous system begins to relax. In that relaxed state, closeness becomes something they can approach instead of something they need to escape. Your presence becomes easier to tolerate, then easier to trust, and only then does deeper connection have a chance to form. This is why doing less, not more, often changes the direction of the bond in ways that effort alone never can. Attachment with an avoidant is not built through more effort. It is built through less pressure, not through constant proving, but through calm consistency, not through emotional sacrifice, but through a felt sense of safety. And when you begin to see this clearly, the pattern becomes painful but understandable. An avoidant person is not usually anchored to relationships in the way many expect. They don't stay simply because of shared history, and they don't remain attached just because so much has already been invested. Their deeper loyalty is often tied to something more internal, whether the connection allows them to stay emotionally regulated and steady within themselves. From that inner place, every choice they make is filtered through an ongoing, silent question. Does this help me feel calm, in control, and protected inside my own world? If the answer feels yes, they can move closer. If it feels even slightly overwhelming or demanding, they instinctively pull back. This is why their behavior can feel so inconsistent from the outside. One moment they seem open and engaged, and the next they become distant or emotionally shut down. Their actions are not always a direct reflection of affection alone, but often a reflection of how regulated or overwhelmed they feel in that moment. When someone is on the receiving end of this, it can feel deeply confusing and unfair, especially when you are giving everything you have. But their withdrawal is not always about your worth or what you lack. It is often about how their nervous system interprets emotional closeness. If the internal environment starts to feel too intense, too fast, or too consuming, their system naturally chooses distance as a form of self-protection. The connection is not rejected because it has no value, but because it begins to feel like too much to hold at once. This is where the painful misunderstanding often happens. The more you try to prove your love through effort, consistency, or emotional intensity, the more it can unintentionally activate their need for space. What feels like reassurance to you can feel like emotional pressure to them. And when that pressure builds, even quietly, their instinct is to step back to regain a sense of balance. Real attachment for them is less about being convinced and more about feeling free enough not to be overwhelmed by closeness itself. This person may start to feel, even quietly, that I could become responsible for their emotional stability, that this connection might demand more from me than I can realistically hold, and once that fear is activated, even the most caring gestures can stop feeling like connection and start feeling like pressure or obligation. The thoughtful gift, the long message, the extra check-in, the emotional expression you hoped would finally reach them can all lose their impact if the underlying energy feels like, please see how much I'm doing, please respond, please choose me back. That is why a real connection with an avoidant is not built by endlessly proving your worth through effort. It is built by becoming emotionally grounded, whole, and not dependent on their reaction to feel okay. That kind of steady self-possession changes the entire dynamic. It lowers pressure. It signals that closeness is something they can enter freely, not something they are being pulled into. It gives them space to choose connection without feeling guilt, fear, or obligation underneath it. And that distinction is far more important than most people realize. The avoidant mind is often drawn less to emotional intensity and more to emotional spaciousness, less to pursuit and more to calm presence, less to performance and more to quiet stability. When you understand this, you stop trying to impress them through overgiving or sacrifice and start protecting your own emotional center instead. That shift is not coldness, it is clarity. It is what prevents you from losing yourself in the process of trying to be chosen by someone who can only feel safe when they are not being emotionally chased. At their core, avoidant individuals are often more loyal to their sense of freedom than to gestures of care, attention, or emotional labor. What they are protecting most is the feeling that they can remain themselves without being shaped, pressured, or absorbed by someone else's expectations. This is why it can feel so confusing when someone gives so much and still experiences distance in return. From the outside, it looks like love should naturally pull them closer. But internally, what matters more is whether closeness feels safe enough to stay in. If approval, reassurance, or emotional clarity is pursued too strongly, even subtly, it can begin to feel like a loss of autonomy. Their system becomes alert to any sign that their independence is being threatened. Every message, every act of care, every emotional move is not only felt for its love, but also interpreted for its potential demand. If closeness starts to feel like it comes with hidden expectations, their instinct is to create distance again. That withdrawal is not always a simple reflection of feeling or not feeling, but often a reflection of how much emotional space they still sense within the connection. This is also why they tend to respond more openly to people who maintain their own life, their own boundaries, and their own emotional balance. Someone who does not collapse into pursuit or lose themselves in proving becomes more naturally grounding to be around. Their steadiness removes pressure instead of adding to it, It allows the avoidant person to approach rather than retreat, because nothing inside them is being pushed or cornered. And in that absence of pressure, safety becomes more possible. When safety becomes possible, connection has room to form. Even when avoidant individuals show care, their loyalty still tends to align with whatever keeps their internal state regulated. That can make their behavior appear inconsistent or emotionally hard to read, but underneath it there is still a pattern. They move toward what feels stabilizing and away from what feels overwhelming. This is why constant emotional analysis, over-explaining, or intensified effort rarely leads to deeper attachment. The more the emotional system feels pressure, the more it quietly resists closeness, even if genuine feelings exist. So the approach has to shift completely. The goal is not to prove how much you can endure or how deeply you can give. It is not to earn love through overextension or self-sacrifice. The goal is to create an emotional environment where connection feels safe enough that it is chosen, not forced. That means staying grounded in your own life, holding your boundaries, and remaining warm without becoming emotionally dependent on every response. It is a paradox, because the more emotionally self-contained you become, the less pressure they feel, and the more possible closeness becomes. This is not about doing less out of frustration. It is about doing differently with awareness. Avoidant individuals do not usually open because they were convinced through effort, but because they finally felt free enough to stay present without losing themselves in the process. That understanding changes everything about how connection actually develops. The less you depend on them to regulate how you feel, the more naturally they can feel drawn toward you. That doesn't mean becoming cold or emotionally unavailable. It means not placing them at the center of your emotional stability or letting your inner balance revolve around their responses. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to emotional dependence. When they start to sense that someone's mood, identity, or sense of worth is anchored too heavily to them, the dynamic stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like responsibility. And that is usually when they begin to withdraw. Not because they are incapable of love, but because love mixed with pressure and dependence can start to feel like confinement. They often want closeness, but they also need autonomy, emotional space, and control over how fast that closeness develops. That is why pulling back with self-respect and holding your boundaries often creates more stability than chasing or over-explaining. When you remain grounded, steady, and internally balanced, you communicate something powerful without words. My life is complete. My center is intact. I care, but I do not collapse into you. And for someone with avoidant tendencies, that can feel far safer than emotional intensity or constant pursuit. Sometimes the most impactful shift is not another message, another explanation, or another effort, but a quiet return to yourself. There is also something important here that people often overlook. Avoidant individuals tend to notice self-respect more than emotional performance. They are aware when someone preserves their dignity instead of giving it away for reassurance. They also notice when someone does not abandon their values just to maintain connection. On a deeper level, even if they are not consciously aware of it, there is often a kind of internal testing happening. Will this person overwhelm me? Will they chase me? Will they demand more than I can emotionally hold? When you maintain healthy boundaries and steady emotional presence, it answers that fear in a calming way. It signals, I am here, but I am not lost in you. I am connected, but still whole in myself, and that gives the nervous system room to relax. This is where the shift becomes clear. More giving, more proving, and more self-sacrifice are rarely what builds secure attachment with someone avoidant. What actually matters more is the emotional environment created between you. They are not primarily responding to effort. They are responding to how safe the connection feels for their internal regulation. That sense of safety is built through calmness, consistency, confidence, and emotional self-containment. When you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and stop abandoning your own center just to keep the bond from breaking, the dynamic naturally changes. The pressure lowers. And in that lowered pressure, connection has a better chance of becoming something real and stable. But there is a hard truth that sits underneath all of this. If staying connected requires you to consistently abandon yourself, then it is no longer intimacy. It is self-erasure disguised as love. Many people stay stuck because they keep asking questions that keep them performing for connection. How do I make them see my value? How do I make them choose me? How do I make them understand what I bring? Those questions keep you focused on being evaluated rather than being present. A more honest question is whether this connection allows you to remain whole, whether it supports your emotional safety, or whether it keeps you trapped in cycles of anxiety, distance, and overthinking. Because understanding avoidant patterns should not turn into endless self-neglect. Compassion is healthy. Losing yourself in the process is not. If you are constantly waiting, constantly adjusting, constantly decoding silence, and constantly shrinking your needs to avoid losing someone, then the relationship may be shaping you into emotional survival rather than emotional connection, and that is not a sustainable place to stay. If you do choose to remain connected, the healthiest version of that connection is not dramatic or chaotic. It is steady, simple, and grounded. You communicate clearly without over-explaining. You hold boundaries without threats or emotional escalation. You allow space without turning it into panic. You let actions reveal reality instead of holding on to potential. You stay warm without collapsing into neediness. You remain open without becoming unanchored. And it is important not to misunderstand this and swing to the opposite extreme. The goal is not to become cold, detached, or emotionally unavailable. It is not to mirror avoidance with avoidance. The goal is emotional health. That means being kind without chasing, honest without begging, open without losing yourself, and present without gripping too tightly. It means you do not punish space, but you also do not accept emotional neglect as a permanent condition. You allow room for connection, while still honoring your own need for respect, clarity, and stability. A calm relationship requires two regulated people, not one person carrying all the emotional weight, while the other only engages when it feels comfortable. And here is another truth people notice over time. When you stop chasing, sometimes the avoidant does come closer. Not always, but sometimes. Because the pressure drops, the emotional environment feels lighter, and their system no longer interprets the connection as something that is demanding more than they can safely give. The emotional noise begins to settle. The sense of being emotionally pulled weakens. They start to feel more room inside the connection, more space to move, more freedom to choose without pressure sitting underneath every interaction. In that space, something can shift. They may soften. They may reach out more. They may seem more curious, more engaged, sometimes even more consistent. But this is where you need to stay clear-headed. Their return is never the real prize. Your self-respect is, because if someone only moves closer when you stop needing them so strongly, that reveals something important about the structure of the connection. It shows you what their system can actually tolerate, and it also shows you what kind of relationship is realistically possible between you, not just what you hope it could become. And if they do come closer again, the most important thing is not to lose yourself in the relief of it. Stay steady. Observe consistency over time. Pay attention to emotional responsibility. Notice whether the space you created leads to real stability or just resets an old cycle in a quieter form. Do not confuse a softer moment with a safer relationship. A return is not automatically repair, and chemistry is not the same as emotional capacity. You need more than feelings in a single moment. You need patterns that hold. You need truth over time. You need to see whether closeness and space can exist without one person repeatedly carrying the emotional cost of keeping things balanced. At the core, avoidant attachment is usually not anchored in intensity, effort, or emotional display. It is anchored in consistency without pressure. They are not necessarily drawn to how much you give, but to how your presence feels inside their nervous system. If being with you feels calm, unpressured, and free of emotional demands, they can stay more open. If it begins to feel heavy, expectant, or emotionally loaded, even subtly, their instinct is to pull back. Not because your care is false, but because their system is highly sensitive to anything that feels like obligation. This is why trying harder often backfires. When you increase pressure through explanation, pursuit, or emotional intensity, it can reduce their sense of safety. What tends to regulate the dynamic instead is emotional steadiness, someone grounded, self-respecting, and not collapsing into panic when distance appears. That kind of presence communicates something very different. It signals that connection exists without force, that closeness is an option, not an expectation. And when choice is preserved, the possibility of real attachment increases slowly and naturally, not through pressure, but through felt safety. The deeper truth is simple, even if it is not easy. They are not loyal to effort or sacrifice. They are loyal to the emotional environment they can exist in without losing themselves. They stay where they can breathe. They open where they feel unconfined. They invest where autonomy is respected. And they withdraw when that internal balance feels threatened. Once you truly understand this, the entire approach changes. The way to maintain connection is not by overextending until you disappear, but by staying grounded in yourself, by holding boundaries without hostility, by offering care without emotional weight, by being present without becoming demanding. That is the paradox. The more emotionally self-contained you become, the less pressure exists in the connection, and the more room there is for genuine closeness to develop. And maybe the deeper lesson is not only about them, but about you as well. That love should not require you to shrink yourself just to be received. That patience is valuable, but not when it turns into self-neglect. That understanding someone's fear should never mean abandoning your own emotional safety. If a connection requires you to disappear in order for it to survive, then it is not teaching you how to be loved, it is teaching you how to endure. So the final truth is this: do not measure your worth by how long you can tolerate distance. Do not measure love by how much you can sacrifice without return. Measure it by whether both people can remain whole inside it, whether both people can breathe, whether both people can be honest, and whether connection does not require one person to lose themselves just to keep it alive. When you truly understand this, the focus naturally begins to shift back toward yourself in a healthier way. Not in a self-blaming way, and not in a self-sacrificing way, but in a grounding way. You start asking different questions, not how do I make them stay, but what kind of connection allows me to stay whole? Not how do I make them choose me, but do I feel emotionally safe in this dynamic? These questions change everything because they bring your attention back to reality instead of possibility, to experience instead of potential. And in that clarity, something important becomes visible. You begin to notice that love should not feel like constant emotional calculation. It should not require you to carefully monitor your words, your timing, your needs, and your reactions just to avoid pushing someone away. It should not leave you guessing your place every time silence appears. Real connection may still have complexity, but it does not consistently place one person in a state of emotional uncertainty while the other maintains distance as a form of safety. At the same time, understanding avoidant patterns can bring compassion. It can help you stop personalizing every withdrawal, every delay, every moment of emotional distance. It can help you see that not all disconnection is rejection. Some of it is regulation, some of it is fear, some of it is learned protection. But compassion only becomes healthy when it includes you as well. When you are included in that understanding, not erased by it. Because there is a point where awareness turns into self-neglect if you are not careful, where you begin explaining away your own emotional discomfort just to keep the peace, where you start calling imbalance patience and calling confusion love. And that is where the lesson becomes critical. Understanding someone else's nervous system should never come at the cost of abandoning your own. A stable relationship, whether with an avoidant or anyone else, cannot be built on one person constantly adapting while the other only engages when it feels comfortable. That kind of dynamic slowly trains you to accept inconsistency as normal, to accept waiting as love, and to accept emotional uncertainty as connection. But real love does not require you to shrink your needs in order to remain included. If a relationship is meant to grow in a healthy way, it will have space for both closeness and individuality without one consistently threatening the other. There will be room for warmth without pressure, presence without fear, and distance without emotional collapse. And most importantly, there will be emotional accountability on both sides, not just emotional endurance on one. So the final conclusion is simple, even if it takes time to fully accept. You are not meant to earn love by reducing yourself. You are not meant to prove your worth through depletion. And you are not meant to stay in cycles where connection only stabilizes when you stop needing it too much. If that is the only way a bond survives, then what is being sustained is not true intimacy, but a pattern of emotional imbalance that asks you to disappear in order to be kept. Real connection does not require you to lose yourself to be chosen. It allows you to remain whole while being loved. And anything that consistently asks you to abandon your own emotional center is not teaching you how to love better. It is showing you where you have been leaving yourself behind.